So it's 7 p.m. here in the Philippines. I believe it's 2 p.m. in Bethlehem. So good evening, everyone. And this is the sixth of the series of the sustainability lectures of DLSU and IALU. And these lectures are really meant to, is really an initiative of DLSU in cooperation with IALU. It is a monthly series of talks meant to engage the global Asalian community in responding to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and Pope Francis's Laudato Si encyclicals. So we're very pleased to have with us our speaker for tonight. But before we introduce our speaker for tonight, I would like to call on Professor Jamil Kader, the Dean of Research of Bethlehem University, to tell us more about their institution. Professor Jamil.
Yes, hi Kathleen. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who is joining us this afternoon. This, I hope, important lecture by Professor Mazen. I wanted to briefly talk about Bethlehem University and tell you a little bit about its mission and history, and then also encourage all our friends and colleagues at your university at La Salle University to work with us and think about collaborating in future research projects together. That would be really a great thing. Bethlehem University is a Catholic Christian co-educational institution. It was founded in 1973. It is the first registered university in Palestine. And the story of Bethlehem University is really an interesting one. It was established after the historic visit of Pope Paul VI to the Holy Land in 1964. And this visit really had been a great boost to the local people. And it's really the Christians and the Palestinian population in Palestine pleaded with the Pope to help them establish a university where Palestinian students could study. Because of the difficult political situation, many people could not really travel abroad easily. So it was easier for them to have a university in Palestine that could serve the higher educational needs of Palestinian society. The university emphasizes excellence in academic programs and the development of students as committed people prepared to assume leading positions in society. I would add a little bit about our faculties. We have 5 different faculties and an Institute of Hotel Management and Tourism. The faculties are the Faculty of Arts, the Faculty of Education, the Faculty of Business Administration, the Faculty of Science, and the Faculty of Nursing and Health Sciences. We have also various centers in biotechnological research, water research, and Mazen, I'm sure, will talk about his biodiversity center in his talk. And we have also various master's programs, about 5 of them, in the social sciences, in biotechnology, in tourism, etc. The student population at Bethlehem University for the last year included about 3,400 students, both undergraduates and graduates. 78% of our student population is female, and 22% obviously is male. We have 408 employees. And let me see what else I can say. We are doing a lot of work in terms of outreach and research, and we have been working very hard at connecting Palestinian faculty with international faculty. And I really hope that because of the reputation of De La Salle School in the Philippines, and I've been really wanting for a long time to come and visit and see the miraculous work that you have been doing there. I'm really happy to see the wonderful work that you have done at your university. And I wanted to learn a lot from you too, so we can transfer whatever great ideas you have there at Bethlehem University. The thing for me is to sort of encourage people from BU and from De La Salle University to start working together on developing international research projects that can serve both the Philippine people and the Palestinian people. Thank you so much for having us, and without further ado, I'll give you back the floor so we can listen to our main speaker tonight.
Thank you very much for that, Professor Jamil. I'd like to turn the floor over to Professor Alvin Colaba, Director of the Center of Engineering and Sustainable Development Research, to introduce our speaker for tonight.
Thank you, Professor Kathleen Aviso. Professor Jamil Kaber, our uh, partners from the Bethlehem University in Palestine, our distinguished speaker, whom I'm going to introduce in a while, Chancellor Emeritus Carmelita Kibenko, our Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation, Professor Raymond Tan, uh, our loyal participants and listeners to this sustainability lecture series of the SAL. Um, the Center for Engineering Sustainable Development Research was established back in 2003, primarily to conduct research studies that would cover many areas of sustainability. At our center, it covers studies related to climate change, energy and environmental systems, disaster resilience and computational intelligence, and other problems that actually of societal interest. This evening, we are again privileged to have one of the distinguished LaSallian going to speak in this sixth edition of the LaSalle Sustainability Lecture Series. He is a professor and teaches and conducts research at Bethlehem University, which is an IALU member institution. He is founder and director of the Palestine Museum of Natural History and the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability at Bethlehem University in Palestine. The center is engaged in research, education, and conservation with a vision of sustainable human and natural communities in Palestine in light of global and local challenges. He has published over 150 scientific papers and several books on topics ranging from cultural heritage to human rights to biodiversity to cancer to environmental education. His many published books include Bats of Egypt, Mammals of the Holy Land, Sharing the Land of Canaan, and Popular Resistance in Palestine, A History of Hope and Empowerment. He also published hundreds of articles and letters to the editor. He received over 40 grants in areas relating to biodiversity, climate change, and sustainability, including from European Union, Darwin Initiative, National Geographic Society, and Royal Society. He serves on the board of a number of Palestinian youth and service organizations and gives lectures every week to international and local organizations and groups relating to Palestine and the environment. To talk on indigenous knowledge and practices for sustainability in difficult circumstances, Palestine as an example, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to call on Professor Mazin Qumsiyeh. Professor Mazin.
Thank you very much. Thanks for hosting us and for the great work that you all are doing. I will start sharing my screen and hope that everybody can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So What I'd like to talk about today is a case study for indigenous knowledge and for biodiversity conservation and activities that basically help people and help nature. And I don't need to remind everybody that nature and people are connected. Actually, we cannot live without nature, of course. But why this particular area that we want to focus on? Well, this area is a very important area. It's an area where humans first migrated out of Africa. So actually, you guys in the Philippines are all Palestinian because you came through Palestine in migration when humans spread out to the rest of the world. Today, even birds migrating from Asia to Africa, Asia and Europe to Africa pass through Palestine. It's a very important area because it's also the first area in which agriculture is recorded. Over 10,000 BC, 12,000 years ago, basically, agriculture was developed here in the Fertile Crescent. It may have developed independently, of course, in other parts of the world at a much later stage. For example, in your part of the world, domestication of rice and so on. But the people who did this domestication of animals and plants in Palestine are these people, my ancestors, if you want, the Canaanites. And these are modern pictures, of course, 100, 150 years ago, what our ancestors dressed like. This is a picture actually of my great-grandmother walking down the steps of the old house, the only picture I have of her. And one of those is my grandparents, one of the kids there. When people developed agriculture, they had time on their hands, so they invented things like the alphabet. The ABCs, for example, were developed in this part of the Fertile Crescent, in the western part of the Fertile Crescent by our ancestors, the Canaanitic people. Also the Arabic alphabet and so on. A is from Aleph, for example, which is the bull, the god of the Canaanites. The B is from Beit, which is a house. The K is from Kaf, and so on. It's also because people had time on their hands. I also had time to think about the gods and the universe, and many religions came here, so it's considered cradle of civilization, but also cradle of the monotheistic religions, as you know. So we have many holy sites and many holy places. Palestine has always been also a diverse culture, diverse society. And I like this picture because it's a picture from 1932 of religious and secular people in Palestine who gathered to object to the Balfour Declaration, which I'll talk about Zionism briefly and what it means. They objected to the idea of a Jewish state. Why? Because Palestine has always been multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious society, as this picture illustrates, for our secular and religious leaders. So this diversity is strength. Diversity in humans is strength. Diversity in nature is strength. If you see a forest dominated by one species of tree or animal, then that's not a healthy, forest. Whereas if you see it having biodiversity, it's healthy. The same for human society. So our society was healthy for hundreds, thousands of years. And of course, we have a problem. The problem was an idea that says we want to create a Jewish state in this land. And this idea, of course, resulted in the removal of most of the native people from this land who happen to be non-Jewish. So the map on the right shows 500 plus Palestinian villages and towns that were ethnically cleansed between 1947 to 1949. And today, 7.5 million Palestinians are refugees or displaced people. And the remaining, the ones who remain here, live in shrinking areas. The shrinking map of Palestine that you see on the top actually was inspired by the shrinking map of the US that you see at the bottom when the Europeans, quote unquote, discovered America. This is colonialism, of course. And this was from my son. My son actually saw the map of the US and created the shrinking map of Palestine when he was a teenager in 1998. And since then it was used by a lot of people. We ended up in those shrinking areas, in those small areas that are now like an archipelago of islands for the Palestinians, which represent 8.3% of historic Palestine, which you see on the map on the left. The map on the right shows the Bantustans in apartheid South Africa, which were actually 11.5% of the land of South Africa. So actually, in our case, it's worse than South Africa. If we look at where I am now in Bethlehem, Bethlehem is here right below Jerusalem, if you want, or south of Jerusalem. Israel, since occupying this area in 1967, just for those of you who don't know the geography, I go back to this map. If you look under 1949, Israel was created on 78% of Palestine, and then occupied the remaining parts of Palestine, which is the West Bank, this kidney-shaped white area, and the Gaza Strip, those two remaining areas of Palestine. Those were occupied in 1967. And Israel proceeded to build settlements in those areas occupied in 1967. The settlements here are shown in blue. And as you can see, they penetrated deep into the West Bank. The area of West Jerusalem was occupied in 1948, so it's all became blue and cleansed of all Palestinians in West Jerusalem. Bethlehem itself has 3 refugee camps. Most of these people come right from near West Jerusalem area that they are at. Literally, they could see their homes across the green line, which was violated in 1967, as I mentioned. And now there is increased attempt to basically make all this area blue, if you want, make it all Jewish Israeli. So Bethlehem is squeezed under walls and settlements and so forth. Bethlehem lost actually 87% of its land that's now under Israeli control. This is what they call settler colonialism. Settler colonialism is very familiar to all the world, including in the Philippines and other areas. You are familiar with it. Everybody is familiar with it because no country escaped it. And I'm talking some countries were at one point colonizers, and sometimes they were colonized. For example, Spain was colonized by people from North Africa for a while. And then it became the largest colonizing country on earth, including colonizing in the Far East, etc. The outcome for colonizing is very simple. There's only 3 models. The Algerian model, where 1.5 million Algerians were killed. Some people say 2 or 3 million. And 1 million French moved back to Europe. Maybe we shouldn't use the word back because some of them were 7 or 8 generations in Algeria. Some of them have never seen France in their life. There's the genocide model like happened in the US and Australia. You're familiar with that. Both scenario 1 and scenario 2 are very rare. Scenario 3 is the most common scenario where descendants of the colonizers and descendants of the colonized live in one country. This is basically, now my screen is frozen. I don't know why. Oh, there we go. This is basically what we have. Now, I don't want to depress you. I'm a very optimistic person. I want to talk about 2 things now. One is the colonization effect on the environment. And second is what we can and are doing about it. How are we addressing this in a positive way at Bethlehem University and in Palestine in general. This is a picture of Jabal Abu Ghnaim, which was a forested area right here next to me in Bethlehem. Actually, my family lost land there that was confiscated to build this Jewish-only colony on stolen Palestinian land, what it used to look like in 1997 at the top and what it looks like today as a Jewish-only settlement. This is an example of the environmental impact, of course, on the landscape. There are other examples. Here's an example using water. Palestine, by the way, is rich in water. There's more rainfall in Ramallah than there is in London. I don't know if you know this fact. Yet, what we have is shortage of water for the local people because we have the natives are deprived of their water. So you can see in the graph on the right that the Israel and Jewish settlers get most of our water, and we get what's below the World Health Organization recommendation for healthy living. Israel also drained the wetland of the Hola area, which after, of course, ethnically cleansing the Palestinians around the Hola area. And this resulted not just in the disappearance of the native Palestinians, but the disappearance of the native species of fauna and flora. Israel also diverted the Jordan Valley waters from Lake Tiberias to the west. This resulted in the drying up of the Jordan Valley. And you can see even that in the satellite image and desertification, how it's spreading, etc. The Dead Sea, by the way, is shrinking, as you can see on the satellite image on the right. And there's a plan to take water from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea, desalinate it and dump it into the Dead Sea. This is environmentally damaging. My understanding is thanks to the pressure that I and many other environmental groups have put on the governments involved, this project is now on hold, and I cannot guarantee it will not be revived, but it's a horrible project. The other aspects of environmental impact is, for example, the Israeli industrial settlements that are built on stolen Palestinian land that dumped their toxic waste on us, on the native Palestinians. Some of my master's students studied these things. For example, Khulud Hamad did some work on the genotoxic effect of the Israeli industrial settlements in the Salfid district. There's also, of course, the environmental impact of war. When Israel every 2 or 3 years tests their new weapons on the local people, like bombing civilian areas, using like this, for example, an effect of a bomb there. You can see what the liquid there is, by the way, sewage. That's a result of this bombing in Gaza recently that happened last month in May 2021, the bombing of the civilian areas. The bombing of the infrastructure, you can see the sewage here again, and the bombing of the roads that happens. Israel intentionally destroys Palestinian infrastructure as a form of collective punishment to the Palestinian people, but also using banned weapons like white phosphorus in civilian areas. Here from the war of 2014, I shouldn't call it a war, from the bombing on the civilian areas that Israel carried out on Gaza in 2014, when they used white phosphorus, even on this United Nations school that was housing refugees. Many of them were burned. Israeli killing takes Palestinian lives regularly, including healthcare workers. This girl was killed, including crippled people like this guy on a wheelchair, including children, including press people. Regularly this happens. Even the New York Times posted pictures of some of the 67 children who were killed just a few weeks ago in May in the bombing in Gaza. Now, Gaza, why is Gaza besieged and blockaded basically, and people in Gaza are literally starving? Even the United Nations, this figure, by the way, this table at the bottom is from the UN. The UN says Gaza is unlivable. It's blockaded because it has gas fields off of the coast of Gaza. You can see in the picture on the upper right-hand corner. So that's why it's blockaded, because Israel is utilizing those gas fields, stealing them basically from the native people. So that's why it's blockaded. Again, my slides sometimes freeze. Now we, the native people, of course, pay a heavy price for our being here, for trying to stay on our land. Over 100,000 of us have been killed, over 800,000 have been injured, and about 1 million have been imprisoned. Now, this is the part where I just talked about the environmental impact, which impacts humans and impacts nature. Now I want to switch to talk about what can be done. And first of all, I must preface that everything I explained to you is condemned by international human rights organizations, every single one of them, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Physicians for Human Rights, even Israeli human rights organizations like B'Tselem. But it's also condemned by international legal instruments like the Fourth Geneva Convention, which governs, supposedly protects civilians in cases of wars and occupation. However, Israel ignores international law, and there is I shared this presentation with the hosts, so they are free to share it with you. And also this is recorded, so you can get these links here. You can also email me. I'm happy to share with you all these documents, etc. There's a lot of international protections for both the environment and for people during the times of conflict. And I'm actually writing a paper now on this. We published before on similar things. There is a lot of international protections that are supposed to be done for us, but of course they are not. Why are they not? Very simple. I can put it in one sentence. Zionism has a strong lobby that ensures that strong countries like the US support it and veto any UN resolutions that have to do with legal rights. It's as simple as that. So, given that we cannot have recourse to international instruments, what can we do? What can we locals do? And what have we done as locals? I mean, as locals, of course, you can understand why we work and how we work as indigenous people. The colonizers want to dehumanize us. They engage in environmental injustice. They steal our natural resources like water and gas and everything else. They steal even our rights to freedom of movement, our rights to education. And I could talk forever about the symptoms of colonialism: right to education, right to movement, right to religion, even right to practice worship freely, go to my holy sites in Jerusalem. My family is Palestinian Christian, by the way. I am not allowed to go to Jerusalem, which is only 4 kilometers away from here, to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Why? Because I'm not Jewish. If I was Jewish from New York or Poland, I could come here, live on stolen Palestinian land in Bethlehem, and move freely to Jerusalem and anywhere I want to. This is the injustice of the Israeli laws, because that's how it is. Now, I am not allowed to enter Jerusalem, even with my American passport, by the way. I have a US passport. I'm not allowed to enter Jerusalem with it. Because again, my family is Christian, not Jewish. It's as simple as that. Now, so this injustice on one side, is it faced by working for environmental justice, acting as agents of our own liberation, sustainability, and regeneration. And this is a form of resistance. I like the figure on the lower right-hand corner. I took it from a friend on the website. This is becoming more human. Resisting is becoming more human. And that's what we do. We resist demolishing our homes and our culture, our heritage. The shepherd woman who takes her sheep to pasture, even when the Israelis actually poisoned her sheep, tried to poison her sheep by putting these poison pellets for the sheep to eat, so that she doesn't have a reason to go back to her field. The local people resist. We went and helped her pick those, etc. Here I am actually sitting in front of a bulldozer here with the mask and the camera in front of a bulldozer that's uprooting sometimes 1,000-year-old olive trees. I could talk forever. I wrote a book actually about popular resistance in Palestine. I'm happy to share it with you if you want. It's available from Pluto Press also, but I'm happy to also, my book on sharing the land of Canaan is also on my website. Sometimes my publishers don't like the fact that I don't believe in copyrights. And I say, willing to share. Knowledge should be shared freely. But anyways, so I'm happy to share these writings with you, including on popular resistance. And there are thousands of methods of popular resistance. One of those is what we are doing with this institute under the auspices of Bethlehem University. It's called the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability. And again, biodiversity and sustainability, because we believe in sustainability of human and natural communities, and that diversity is strength, whether in nature or in society. This institute does things like this as forms of resistance. For example, growing our own foods, our own fish and vegetables in aquaponic systems. We actually brought some people from Gaza and trained them to build these aquaponic systems, which help them, of course, sustain themselves by having meat and vegetables at the same time. We educate our children from very young age, and we believe in the Chinese saying that goes, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. So we want them to do things with their hands, not for us to lecture them or anything. So you can see touching, feeling, etc. Recycling here, for example, recycling trash and paper to make various things with it, gifts for impoverished families, etc. Our institute is relatively new. We started officially in 2014. We opened up to the public in 2017, and we opened the garden, botanical garden, which has some over 60 rare plants, etc. in it. It's for in situ and ex situ conservation. We opened it in 2019, and we were slated to open the big Museum of Natural History in 2021, but the coronavirus and everything delayed us, and also lack of funding. So hopefully in 2022, we will open a big National Museum of Natural History. We also have a community garden. You can see some of this information on the website, by the way, palestinenature.org. So you can see some of our actions. You can also go on Facebook, look for us, and see our daily activities, and email us if you want at info@palestinenature.org. And we're happy to collaborate. We have collaborations here at the Institute with 12 countries so far, including joint grants. For example, I have grants with the British Museum of Natural History, which is one of the oldest. I think it and sometimes the French one compete for which one was first. But anyway, we have collaboration with both the Museum in France of Natural History and also the British Museum of Natural History, the University of Oxford. We have collaborations with German universities and German museums. For example, in Berlin, I have collaboration with the Berlin Museum of Natural History, etc. And in agriculture with Spain and Portugal, we have collaborations in permaculture and things like that. As mentioned in the introduction, we had 40 grants so far, and we have several more on the way. We are not having a problem in getting funds for our work because we actually deliver more than what we promise when we apply for a grant. And we got grants, even the first grant from National Geographic Society given to Palestinians was given to us. So we're happy to collaborate with you. You can email me, as I said, on this email or on my email, which I'll put in my private email, which I can put in the chat too. I'll stop here and I'll stop sharing. And by the way, this is pictures of me being arrested a few times by the Israeli occupation. So you see my T-shirt here on the upper right-hand corner. It says, "Got human rights, Palestinians don't." And I'm grateful for this soldier. He proved me right.
Okay, thank you very much for that talk, Professor Qumsiyeh. Now the floor is open for any questions from our audience. So any questions? So at the moment, Professor Qumsiyeh, so what is one of your biggest grants on? Yeah, you mentioned that you have a lot. So what is the main, like, what the center is really trying to focus and prioritize on?
Yeah, thank you. Our biggest grant now ongoing, which is a 3-year grant, and we're about halfway through it, is from the European Union, about $1 million or so. It's a grant that involves 3 centers, one in the Galilee, one in Beit Sahur, Palestinian Center for Rapprochement, and we at Bethlehem University are the lead on this. And it involves setting 3 centers at those 3 institutions: a biodiversity center, a human diversity center, and an education center. We actually last week opened the first center, which is the biodiversity center here. The biodiversity center, I was so thrilled that we managed to open it. It includes molecular labs here in the campus where we are. And includes like DNA and other, it includes a herbarium, for example, for plant studies. It includes, animal rehabilitation, many other centers in this biodiversity center. This will give us the tools basically to do a lot of research. And I didn't get a chance to talk about the research, of course, because I'm not sure if you're interested in it, but we publish about 2 papers a month now on various areas ranging from biodiversity to genotoxicity, cancers, effects of environmental things, etc.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. That's very interesting. And it's nice to know that there's a lot of activity going on already in your center. We have one question in the chat coming from Hanadi Yunan. So, can you expound about the school children outreach that the organization does? So, you mentioned a while ago that you teach the children hands on. Yeah.
Thank you for this question. Coincidentally, we're in the middle of a summer camp for school children. So they are actually outside. I could even take my laptop and show you the kids outside. We had the summer camp here for 25 children. We decided to limit the numbers because of the COVID-19 thing. So and to have it all outside. So these children come and learn about nature. They learn about recycling. They learn about self-respect and empowerment and so forth. Um, when I say they learn, this is a very important point. We don't teach them. Again, we create an environment that allows them to learn. This is self-motivated learning. Just like I create an environment for the plants in my botanical garden to grow with water, sunlight, whatever soil, fertilizers, compost, etc. We create an environment in which the children grow, just like the seeds grow on their own if there's a correct environment. So I think that's the philosophy of education that we engage in with the children. We have actually, we do activities weekly here, sometimes daily, for children. Of course, it was, somehow retarded during the pandemic crisis. But I'm proud to say that the museum never closed its doors. And I'm talking about 7 days a week. We're always here. I even sleep here. By the way, I didn't mention this, but I am a volunteer. I don't get a salary. I work 17 hours a day here, totally as a volunteer. I don't get salaries. Thank God I worked in the US for a while, saved some money. I even donated to Bethlehem University, me and my wife, $250,000 to start this project. So we're self-sufficient. We also grow our own vegetables in the garden and stuff like that. That helps, of course, reduce our expenses. So it's really nice. And we depend on volunteers, which is the last thing I want to say. If any of you are, regarding this question, if any of you like to work with children, please come and volunteer. We could use help from anybody. We provide room and board to volunteers from abroad. I used to have 8, 10 volunteers from outside Palestine on a daily basis, continuing with us. Of course, this was reduced. Now I only have 3 international volunteers and about 11 Palestinian volunteers this week, for example. But we hopefully the travel restrictions will be lifted soon. I heard August 1st. So we would welcome you to come and visit us, volunteer with us, spend time with us. Another thing we could think about, by the way, is internship exchange. If any of your students want to come and do internship here, we'd love to host them. I've done it with some internationals from Germany and others. They ended up publishing papers with us. For example, Julius from Germany actually published 2 papers with us on orchids of Palestine. So you can do even a short-term internship of 2 months and publish a paper from it.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think Professor Raymond Tan would like to ask a question.
Yes, just a quick one. Good afternoon, Professor Mazin. I was wondering if any of your work is looking at the midterm future of climate change and how that potentially affects the biodiversity in Palestine, and what protective measures do you need for that additional pressure?
Yeah, of course, I could take for hours, talk for hours about this subject alone because it's a very big subject. We actually have been working very closely with the Environmental Quality Authority. The Biodiversity Center here that we opened last week, as I mentioned, plus the Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability works closely with the Environment Quality Authority, which is a governmental organization, as well as with NGOs. We are the lead basically on issues of climate change and biodiversity and environmental impacts in these issues in Palestine. The EQA, Environment Quality Authority, has a section for climate change. The EQA has actually asked us to do two things. One, write the report to the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is, of course, we are signatories, as I think the Philippines also, and most countries are signatories on it. They write, reports to the convention that are required by the COP, the Convention of Parties, as they call them. The second thing that the EQA asked us to do was to draft the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans going forward, especially focusing on mitigation and adaptation to climate change. So this is a work in progress. And that's why I said I can talk forever about it, because we have a lot of data that we accumulated, but we are still formulating plans of action regarding these things. And actually, the plans of actions are associated also with having implementation measures that are very specific, as we call them, smart ideas, specific, measurable, etc. And we will have funding for this also. We are the lead institution on this. We will have a lot of work on this to do, and it's not easy, to be honest. The biggest challenge, again, I could talk for a long time, but I don't know how much time we have. The biggest challenge we have is the Israeli occupation. We are not sovereign. It's not like there's Palestine here and Israel here. As I explained, there's Israel on top of Palestine, leaving us in Bantustan's isolated archipelago of islands without connecting to each other. So how am I going to plan and structure and mitigate and adapt to climate change if I don't even have sovereignty, if I cannot, even me as Mazen, I cannot move, as I told you, from here to Jerusalem, where I used to be a high school teacher. How am I going to help, So this is our biggest challenge. If we end the occupation, have our freedom, end colonization, as indigenous people, we can, I'm sure, contribute. I wouldn't say, solve the problems that are there, because, in the Philippines and everywhere else, we have problems. I mean, I actually told my students the other day that humans have a 50-50 chance of succeeding as a species. We have 50-50 chance of addressing climate change and not getting nuclear weapons being dropped on us from the various countries that have them, including Israel and Russia and America, which is now putting small nuclear submarines, small nuclear weapons on submarines everywhere, including, in the oceans everywhere. We have challenges that are so difficult. But at least if we end the colonization, we can contribute in the same way that the Philippines can contribute in environmental issues, or Italy, or any other country. We can at least be much more effective on our part. That's why I think we can address climate change much better if we do this. But I'm happy to share with you our strategies, our action plans, all these things.
Okay, thank you.
And we could use your support in that. If you know experts in different areas, like writing the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. I don't know who wrote it for the Philippines. If they want to help us write ours, I would love to connect, if you connect me with them.
Yeah, we might be able to find out who's involved here in the Philippines.
That would be great. That would be great help.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Professor Anthony Chu. What specific water or liquid waste were you referring to in your paper in 2021? Is it from the community or is it from industry?
I'm not sure what paper you are referring to in 2021. The paper I mentioned about the chemical waste from industrial plants that affected and caused genotoxicity, that was published in 2014. And then we published 2 or 3 more papers in 2016 and
Oh, okay.
17 relating to pollution. The paper that was about genotoxicity from the industrial settlement was both gas pollution and liquid pollution, not solid waste, that they dumped on the local villagers in Brooklyn and Kufr in the valley near the Israeli industrial settlements of Barkan that's built on stolen Palestinian land. But that's where it is from the industry of the Israelis, not from our own community. Now, we could talk about source of pollutions being both from the Israelis and from Palestinians, of course. I don't want to make Palestinians as angels that we don't pollute our own environment. Sorry, we actually have a lot of pollution also produced like any other country. I'm sure the Philippines, you have pollution and you have companies, corporations that dump waste without paying attention to what it does to the environment. I think we have a lot of work to do, both as Palestinian indigenous native people, but also we have the issue of colonization, which I mentioned a couple of examples only. I could cite many other dozens of examples. I give you one example that we can cite for how the colonizers affected our environment. When Israel was created, I told you they destroyed more than 500 villages and towns. Palestinians kicked us out. Well, when I say they destroyed the villages, they destroyed all the trees around those villages, indigenous trees like oak, like carob trees, figs, almonds, olives, etc. They bulldozed all those trees, and then they planted European pine trees, basically replacing diverse agro and natural biodiversity with the monoculture of European pine trees. This was devastating to the local Palestinian environment. And I could cite many other examples. So there's damage done both by the Zionist colonizers and by the native people. But the native people were living in harmony with their environment for thousands of years. Modern industrialization, of course, accelerated pollution, etc. And the fact that we now have these packaged stupid things that people package in plastic and things like that. But clearly, just like I say, why did the Europeans, when they went to North America, kill 2 million buffaloes? Why? Did they hate buffaloes? No, the buffaloes were food of the native people. So they uprooted them, they destroyed them, so that the natives don't have a place to, a source of food, so they die, because they want to reshape the country to be a European country, not a native country.
Okay, thank you for that. So Professor Chu was actually talking about your paper on biodiversity and environmental conservation in Palestine, which you
Oh,
wrote.
okay.
Yeah, so he was
Yeah,
referring to.
that was a review paper of this type, basically reviewing where we are. So in that I cite many things, including pollution. Yes, as I mentioned, yes, both solid waste, liquid waste, and we shouldn't forget also gas or air pollution, which comes from cars, automobiles, and
Yeah.
jet airplanes and other things. Of course, Palestine, our contribution, by the way, to greenhouse gases is minuscule. Ours meaning the native people. We have no industries. We have not many cars as in industrialized countries.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Qumsiyeh. Are there any other questions from our audience? So it's very interesting what you've managed to accomplish in your center.
Yeah,
And yes.
if I may just ask if people would email me and or
Mhm.
send me their email address, at least we can stay in touch. And if you think of any other question in the future, you can ask me.
Yes.
But also we can put you on our email list, which is an email list that sends about a message every week or two relating to these issues that we were discussing and how we may collaborate. But I again hope that what you take from what I said is that we can do a lot as a species if we collaborate. And so that's why the cooperation, I'm grateful for Jamil for mentioning this also, that we can cooperate. We need to cooperate. We must cooperate. If we don't cooperate, if we don't exchange ideas, if we don't exchange experience, if we don't work together, the greedy people in the world damage our environment to a point where it's not livable, even for their own children, by the way.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, thank you
so we
very
have
much.
to work together.
Yes, that's true. So for those of you who would want to get in touch with Professor Mazin, he already sent his email address in the chat box. It's mazin@qumsiyeh.org. So that you can discuss more comprehensively on other future engagements or other future topics. So I think thank you so much for accepting our invitation to give a lecture in the sustainability series hosted by LaSalle and IALU. Now, before we end tonight's event, I would like to share my screen um, to inform you about our upcoming webinar, which will be on July 28th. Hold on, let me just, okay, there we go. Okay, okay, so next month, so we're doing it monthly. So we just went a bit off schedule for tonight because we have a speaker, of course, from Palestine. But we'll go back to our original schedule on July 28th. So it will be at 8 o'clock in the morning. We will discuss iStart to accelerate achievements of the SDGs, the case of Leyte Province, Philippines. So our speakers would be our very own academician Alvin Colaba and Honorable Leopold Petilla, who is the governor of the province of Leyte. So if you're interested, please register at this link at bit.ly/DLSU07, or you can take a shot of this QR code and it will take you right to the registration portal. And just like any other, all of our lectures, we are uploading a copy of the presentations and the recording in our YouTube channel, DLSU Sustainability Lecture Series. So if you scan the QR code, it will take you to our YouTube channel. So that's it, guys. That's it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, and I do hope that everyone learned something today. Good
Thank you,
evening for
Kathleen.
Thank you. Good evening to those of you in the Philippines and for those of you in Palestine. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Same
Thank
Please
to
you.
share
you.
with us the recording if you want.
Yes, yes. It
Yes.
will also be posted on YouTube, but I'll be sending an email to remind everyone of the recording.
Thank you very much for hosting us.
Good
Thanks.
Thank you,
afternoon to you.
guys.